Everyone, you're listening to Free Kick, the AFLW Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host Mel, and today I'm joined by Liam and Will. Will, good to have you back.
Yes, very good to be back. Unfortunately, I didn't get to boast about my fantastic week last week, which I think is probably a good thing for everyone involved, but very happy to be back this week. Another great round of AFLW action. We're halfway through the season. Looking forward to the chats.
Excellent. And Liam, specifically Liam, how's it going?
Thank you specifically, Mel. It's going pretty well. I managed to actually have a half-decent captain for the first time in nearly a month, so that really did help to rally the spirits, and as it turns out, my fantasy score as well.
Fantastic. I can't say I've done that. I've once again captained the wrong person. We're now halfway through the season, and maybe I'll get it right once in the season. But what a good game of footy, and a good week of footy, and I'm just gonna start by saying Friday, oh my gosh, I was so happy. I don't think I can be happier than watching my two sides play on a beautiful public holiday in the sun when my number one side does actually win, but it was a great day. And got to hang out with you guys for a bit as well. Just great game overall. Which games did you guys get to this weekend? Last weekend?
Yeah, I got to the Richmond Freo game, as you said. I stuck around for the Carlton-Sydney game, which I think was probably my highlight of the weekend, actually. It was a very competitive game. Sydney, who I was going for, didn't quite manage to come away with the win, but they're showing massive signs of improvement, which is fantastic for the competition. You and I also went to the Melbourne-Geelong game down in Geelong, which went about as well as we kind of expected, but oh, gee, that Melbourne side, they are fearsome the way they move the footy. They really do look like a team that's going to push for a second premiership.
They really held on to a decent margin for the first 2.5-ish quarters there, but then it was a bit of a flogging that we probably expected to see. And Liam?
I was just the Richmond Fremantle game, because the Bombers game was near impossible to get to, and it sounds like it was disgustingly hot to go and watch as well. And I also was not going to go down to go and watch Geelong get pumped in the nicest possible way, Will.
That's
don't care for Geelong as much as you, and I don't like front runners like Melbourne just in general. So, yeah, it was a no from me.
Whack. But fair enough, I think.
Whack by giving them a compliment because they're that bloody good.
Damn them for being good. But yes.
Oh, well.
It was a good week of footy.
Speaking about damning people for being good, Will, how'd you go this week?
Not as good as me.
Not as good as Liam this week, but I've still managed to keep my sailboat ahead of him in the night. So I've scored 1422, which gives me a round rank of 430 to keep my overall rank moving upwards to 327. So a movement of about 150 exactly. In terms of what kept me afloat this week, it really was my uniques, and we'll talk about them a bit more in a second, but like most people this week, a lot of the really popular options didn't quite perform as well as we'd like, so I had a few players that did me really, really well to keep me up into the higher bracket.
And we've actually all had a week where we got points in the 1400s and a pretty top 500 round rank, so props to the Free Kick team for doing decently. Liam, huge week.
Yeah, huge, massive. I've actually scraped through by the skin of my teeth, and it's only down to one unique, and that is the VC Lupo on Laura Gardner for the second highest score of the round, which has truly saved me a world of hurt. So props to her, because otherwise my trades this week basically netted out at 0 points. If it did generate me a little bit of cash just because of where I ended up putting things. But I also would like to summarise my weekend by saying that I have a bunch of defenders who appear to not want to play in the fourth quarter. I'm looking specifically at you. Well, actually, Tani Evans, Charlie Thomas and Eilish Sheeran all had pretty ropeable single-digit scores in the second half. So I am severely disappointed in that, in what otherwise could have been every single one of my defenders can get to 90 type of round. That really did bring me back down to earth a bit.
Great summary of what happened in your team there, Liam, but what was your actual rank?
That detail, that's the reason we do this. A good point. So I scored a 1429. I had a round rank of 360, and I had moved up 283 spots to rank 432. And I'm going to propose that we just take a beat to pause and mark respects to the fact that I've actually moved up in rank for the first time.
He's reversed the slide. The mid-season
I have
slide
reversed
is
the
off.
slide 3 rounds earlier than I did last year, and that truly fills me with joy. And again, it feels even better when I know that it is almost entirely down to Laura Gardner.
Yeah, good captain choice there. I did not have a good captain choice once again, and that's pretty much... Yeah, I mean, like my midfield were all fairly low scoring as it was. And then when I watched Gardner play, I was like, thank God I didn't captain her. That was a shocker. Well, a shocker by Gardner's standards. And then watching Noffy play.
I hope that's Garner.
Garner, yes, I keep pronouncing them the same. Garner. And then I watched Noffy play, and I was like, oh my Lord, I know what I've done here. I've got the tagger and the taggee both in my team. One of them is my captain, and it's the final game of the round, and I'm watching this game intently, being like, great game of footy. This is my fantasy score playing out in front of me. Oh, gosh, that was a stressful one for me. But overall, I got a 1409, which, pretty happy with, just given I had a crappy captain choice once again. Means the rest of my team's doing okay. So round rank of 479, total rank of 792. Top 1,000, which is great, given I started in the top 10,000 just. So, 450-point gain again. If I can do that one more time, just another 450-point gain, rank gain, I'll be pretty happy.
Nice. Just all of us can aim for that
450 rank gain.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think
I'll aim for that and then be minus 18.
Perfect.
I'll be minus 100. Pretty happy with that.
I wouldn't say no.
I'm so glad you're here just so that you can keep rubbing in your score that you didn't get to do last week.
Yes.
So plus 4s. Will, other than giving it to yourself, is there anyone you'd like to give yours to?
It's funny, last week I would have given it to myself, but this week I'm not, because I did a last minute trade which didn't quite work out, and I could blame you, Mel, but really it was entirely me.
Who did you trade?
So I traded out Bresnahan for Claudia Gunjaka, who scored a 39.
Oh.
Which, the only reason that I'm okay with it is because she made $6,000, and that allows me to have enough money to do my trades this week, but more on that later. So my plus 4 for this week is Ali Morford. And bringing in Ali Morford after round 1 has been the single best trade I have done for the entire year. Because being able to have Ali Morford score usually 30 to 40 points more than pretty much every other ruck that's going around is doing me wonders, and it's part of the reason why I'm doing well.
I like it.
It's actually hilarious, the fact that the biggest miss from your starting side in Matilda Schultz has culminated in your single best trade of the year.
Yep, absolutely.
Because Matilda Schultz made like 300k in 2 weeks. If you started with her and you've gone, nope, I don't have her, so I may as well go up to the number one, mid-priced option as it would appear, because she's playing basically as a midfielder, and she's now gained the 4th highest amount of cash, 1 rank below Matilda Schultz. So you have stumbled upon a pot of gold.
Oh, I wouldn't have said stumbled. I was actually very, very keen on Ellie Morford as a player.
Will, you missed out on the number 1 rookie, number 2 ranked rookie. That is a stumble, and you have turned it into a pot of pure gold.
A pot of gold. And I think because a huge focus of this week's episode is going to be Matilda Scholes. And I'm just so glad I don't have to have this conversation because I've already done it 4 weeks ago. Ellie Morford has basically single-handedly helped me get up into the the upper echelons of the rankings as far as I can tell by having that advantage. I've basically nicknamed her my advantage. That's how much I've really rated Ali Morfitt's ability to make my team work. So Ali Morfitt, keep doing what you're doing because she is scoring bulk points and it's doing me fantastic.
Yeah, well, I'll save the rock conversation for later. Actually, Liam.
I am going to give my +4 Kiara Bowers Award for the best player of the week to Laura Gardner in a shocking twist to absolutely nobody. Can I just actually give a shout out
on this for Liam? Because you can do it every week.
She's the second highest scoring player in the game, third.
Which is why you
is she third or second at this point?
Because it's too easy.
I feel like you're giving the +4 to the way that you navigated the loophole.
I'll give it to you this week. I agree with you, Mel. The vice captain, that's worth it.
That's what I mean.
Nifty.
And it was the fact she also put together a really nice, and I think she might have done a 40-point last quarter to really put my questions about whether or not I take the loop completely out of the equation. Finished off with a 44-point final quarter to make it like, yep, that's totally fine. Because otherwise I would have been sitting there going like, Noffy went 172 last week and Garner's coming off the back of a 120 and 2 150s. I don't know what I would have done, or I don't want to think about how crap my rank would have been without her. So let's just move on to yours, Mel. Because this one was also tough to watch.
Yeah, this is the one game of the week that I didn't watch or listen to any component of, which was, we were just talking about the Saints-Bulldogs game at, I think, 7 p.m. on Friday. But I checked my phone later that night to have a look at the fantasy scores, and my God, Priest. Wow. We spoke about how we were thinking that she's going to be top 5 defender just because she has had a really good run and a really good role and really coming into her own a little bit before. But can't say I saw that coming. And that's with 2 frees against as well. What a huge game. Liam, did you watch it? Can you shed some light on how that happened?
I did watch it. It came a lot down to the fact that Ellie Blackburn is very good at reading where the ball is going to go. She's an elite player at it, and that's why quite often players that tag Ellie Blackburn have great scores. Hannah Priest, I think, may have had a 5th of all of St Kilda's tackles. I'm going to try and pull the number up whilst I talk about it, but she was tackling absolutely everything. She had a couple of shots on goal. No, she had a 6th of all of the tackles of St Kilda.
Where'd you get that so quickly?
They only had 59 in total. Oh, I've got my magic spots. Importantly, though, she was around the ball all the time. She is a reliable kick in a team that is not very good at hitting targets. And I think that was honestly the main thing to take away from that game. There was a relatively high number of times where possession chains went possession, mark, kick, drop mark. And then there was just a scrum and a tackle. So Priesty looked incredible.
Will, anything to add on to why Priest had such a good week?
Because she's a legend. That's why.
She's not. That's not the reason.
I love Hannah Priest. She's been one of my unique picks that's done me very, very well. I've had her since the start. She's now the outright best defender going round. I'm just very happy with it, to be honest.
Yeah, well, that's all good and well about Priest, but I'm going to start off our Paige Scott -1 for the flop of the week with mine. I kind of alluded to it before, but having Single and Noffy in that game, wow. Not only, Single was an amazing tagger, she's so good that she prevented Noffy doing literally anything for 9 minutes. And the most annoying part of this was I didn't really see it coming because Hatchard's usually the tag, and then Hatchard had a great quarter. And I was like, no, I'm dying. Neither of them are doing well. And then luckily they shook it up a little bit, and Noffy was actually able to play some football, which was nice. And they both turned out with some decent scores. I mean, it wasn't the best thing ever, but it could have been a lot worse. So that's making me really consider just how low the taggies scorer can be and what that means for Single. Liam?
I was just going to say that I think you can give a little bonus kind of add-on -1 to the Gold Coast coaching staff who have pulled the same move that West Coast did with tagging Laura. They've decided, as much as every other team in the comp tags Anne Hatchard because she can dominate, we're going to tag the other one and lose by a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like they started losing a lot more once they took the tag off. But then why would you take the tag off and not put it on Hatchard? It doesn't really make a lot of sense there.
I think it might have been as well that it wasn't completely off Marinoff. It was just a little bit less intense. I think from the top of my mind as well, there was a bit of time off ground for Single in the second half, more so than in the first half.
Yeah.
And that contributed to her scoring, but it never went to Hatchard. It just wasn't as strong kind of after the first two quarters. But again, I just don't understand why you wouldn't tag the player that if they don't get tagged, I'd say she is up there with Garner for a walking 10 coaches votes because she can absolutely dominate. Kick more goals this week. Well, actually maybe didn't, but doesn't even matter. Like Hatchard is the player you need to tag. And so it's an L for Gold Coast Suns coaching staff.
Yep. I hope every coach in the AFLW watches that game and it's like, we're going to tag Hatchard, and then Noffy can get me all of the great points and everyone else who captained her as well. Liam, who's your neg one?
Well, this one was a really tough one to pick, to be honest. I'd like to give it to Megan Kaufman, who was my trade-in, for her 58 in the end, which was really disappointing given for most of the time she had a great role. But I am still coming to grips with what on earth is going on at Fremantle, and I honestly think we could dedicate a full 30-minute sub-episode to what on earth is happening there. They've gone from the break the record in the first 2 weeks levels of tackles to they got out-tackled by more than 30 against Richmond on the weekend.
But won. Like,
I know, it's like really, but didn't massively overpossess the ball either. I truly don't understand it. And also they made the decision that if you were a midfielder, you were a midfielder, except for the quarter you would spend sitting at full forward. So all of Stannett, Gabby O'Sullivan, Miller and Kaufman basically spend a quarter of their time sitting in the goal square. I don't get it. And so I can't blame Kaufman for that. The player that I am going to give my -1 to, and that's Britt Benici for her, I think, 68 off the top of my head. What really frustrated me is she's 69. She started really, really well, but could not put together consistent scoring through the quarters. Now, that game was also very weird because of how windy it was. It was not a lot of marks being taken. It was all like distance kicking, which probably did have an impact on Benici, but to only put up a 7 and a 12 in the second half from someone who we know can score 100s, around that low 100 week to week because of the way she just racks up a decent amount of tackles, gets the marks, get the possessions. That was a real flop performance in a game where I did need her to go a little bit better to be my differentiator.
And Will?
Yeah, I've given mine to Chloe Malloy, who for the second straight week, not that I had the chance to actually say it last week, but for the second straight week has got my -1. 51 versus Carlton, just ain't cutting it, unfortunately. Didn't seem to be copping too much particular attention or anything. She just was very good at getting where the ball ain't against Carlton, unfortunately. So, yeah, not great from Chloe, unfortunately.
She was one of 2 players to not take a mark for Sydney. The other one being Alicia Newman.
In fact, realistically, if it wasn't for 7 pretty good tackles, she's done very, very little else in that game. Only 10 disposals, didn't kick a goal. Yeah, it's a weird one.
I think a possible trade out if you've got no other issues, which if you don't, then congratulations. You've got a much better side than I.
Oh, gosh. Well, speaking of people that have some very good sides, Will, why don't you take us through who's smashing the game with your watch and wait scoreboard?
Oh, the watch and wait scoreboard. Our leader is once again Josh with his team Fithus, who's at 7-6-1-9, which is a 9-point margin over the second best coach and 11 points over the third. So congratulations.
You're not going to try and pronounce the second base side there, Will?
Zinisters.
Yeah,
Zinisters,
all right.
I would say.
I reckon you could have launched that with the first time.
Yeah, probably could have. I'm not going to name the second one, though, because that's very strange. But the top 100 marker sits at 7,306, and the score to stay in was 1417. So starting to really push the high numbers to stay into that top 100 as you'd expect at this time of year. In terms of our free kick league, the highest in our league, the top 3 are all sitting in our league, which is fantastic, battling it out. We also have 34 in the top 100, so we had a few drop out for the first time, but importantly, I am now in that top 100. So
No, that's in the top 100 of our league, not top 100 of the comp.
Well, I'm in the top 100 of our league.
Don't worry about me. Oh, gosh. Okay, so for our hot topics this week, going to go through 2. First, we'll go through having a look at the matchups for the second half of the game. So halfway through, what have we learned about the teams in terms of hardness to play against for each of the lines in the first 5 games? And what do we think that's going to mean for some of those key lines in each of the teams? Who should we be looking more favourably on, and who should we be looking away from? And then we'll have a run through our new favourite segment, Love It or Lister It, with some big names that we might all have to be dealing with later when we do our trades. So in terms of the half 2 matchups,
Quick pause, Mel.
Oh, yeah.
Half 2?
Sorry, that's very financial yeary. In terms of the Q4, H2, in terms of the second half, oh, gosh.
This is a financial game. It's okay.
Oh, yes. There are
We
dollars.
are not a financial podcast. This is not financial advice.
Technically it is, though, when you think about it.
Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future
Indicator
performance.
of
That
future
still
performance.
holds.
Guys, I already work in financial services regulation. I don't need it bleeding into my hobbies. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, back to footy then. Looks like Carlton and Geelong have some pretty easy runs coming up. Just having a look at how many teams that they're playing that are below their current ranking. So they're coming currently 6th and 8th, and they've got pretty much bottom ranking games going forward, which is good for Geelong, being Will's team. So Brisbane and North currently, top 3 and 4, they've actually both got to play Adelaide and Melbourne coming up, who are currently ranked 1 and 2. And I think we're all pretty aligned on the idea that those 4 are going to kind of finish top 4 in some order. So that's going to be really interesting when we think about how those 4 swap positions, who gets the ball first, which midfielders are doing the tackling, versus maybe getting a disposal in there. Will?
Yeah, I actually think, ironically, thanks to their easy run, I think one of those 4 teams that we probably all agree are the top 4 is probably going to fall out of the top 4 because of Geelong, who should realistically win their remaining 5 games. So let's just say that...
Will, I'm going to step in a little too early there. They are currently only 20-cent favourites over Essendon.
That's probably...
So it's actually very, very close.
It's actually arguably their toughest matchup to come as well, to be honest.
Probably. Yeah, no, definitely harder than Fremantle because they're rubbish.
Yeah, definitely. Terrible. But I think my point is Brisbane dropped a few early games. So let's say they lose a couple of games to North and to Adelaide and Melbourne, for example. They might end up dropping out to a Geelong. Probably doesn't really matter in terms of fantasy, but I just want to give Geelong a plug. But it does create a really interesting point, as you say, Mel, because a lot of people have been targeting Georgie Prespakis and Amy McDonald in particular because they've got an easy run. We know that Prespakis has just lost a bucket load of money as well due to her lowest score for the season is 68. So she's a player that could conceivably even be a target next week if she doesn't go massive. If she can score sort of 100-ish, she might still lose a little bit of money due to a high break even. Could be a really good upgrade target to go for someone like, say, a Benici if she doesn't return to her form. So there's going to be some really interesting players to target from those teams. Whereas, I mean, we talk about Brisbane and North, for example, like Riddell and Garner are probably going to score pretty well regardless of who they play, but it might change how you look at some of the other players. For example, some of the defenders. We've talked a bit about Nat Grider across across the recent episodes? Will it be good that she's playing against good teams because the ball's going to be down there more, or will it mean that she's got to actually do a lockdown role? It's going to be really interesting to look at.
Liam?
Oh, I think this is the interesting from a football watching perspective, but I think the individual matchups and how they align with different players' roles is probably a better indication of who our targets are going to be because, Geelong, you talk about having an easy run. Essendon are one of the hardest teams to score against for midfielders because as much as Essendon are an expansion side, their great skill is being able to extract the ball and get it out to their wings as quickly as possible. And that really does limit a lot of midfield scoring unless you're Anne Hatchard. And even then, she had to kick 2 goals, and I think she took 4 marks inside 50. So you're really beginning to see that it's actually all about the defense versus a certain position. And I think that's the general idea of this, right? We kind of talk about who's got good runs for their position.
That's where I think Georgie Prasparkas coming up against a tough to score against Essendon, there's more money to drop, and then she finishes with some really easy, much easier to score against teams like a Hawthorn and a few of the other ones that we've traditionally said pick players that are playing against these teams. So I reckon it's going to be super interesting to watch because if she can put up a decentish score against an Essendon, that's a suggestion that, yep, she's still in reasonable form. Pull the trigger the week after because she's going to lose a little bit more money. Hopefully, I say hopefully, but if she scores, a big 140 or whatever against Essendon, then she's probably not going to lose money, but it's a good indication that she's, raring to go in terms of point scoring. So I think that's kind of how I'm looking at it in that sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I might kick us off with the midfielders then, since we've just been talking about Prasparkas a bit. So what I've had a look at is we've seen the defence first position hardness scale of how hard it is for players in certain lines when they're versing certain teams, and just kind of punted that forward from the last 10 games and the last 5 games based on the matchups that each team has. And having a quick look at that, being able to see which teams have the worst on average run for each line. And the midfield is coming out suggesting that Gold Coast has got a pretty tough run for the midfielders, which I think is quite interesting because Rowbottom is elite regardless. So I don't think that necessarily has an impact on her. And I think a lot of this is swayed by something, Liam, you've spoken about a lot before, which is Brisbane being a hard team to play against for the midfielders. But do we think that this has an impact on anyone else in the Gold Coast midfield? Maybe Whitford or even Rowbottom? Liam?
I was going to say it's almost certainly Single and Whitford who will struggle with this the most. We do see that the skill of Brisbane is their ability to dominate the ball, and they're also quick on the ball. And in the event that there are stoppages, unless you're someone who can dominate in there, you can very easily lose out on points. You kind of look at the fact it was only Batesy who scored well on the weekend against Brisbane, and outside of that, I think they might have had a 90. I think Bates was like a 96, and then everyone else was in the 60s. Yeah, when Bates 98 on the back of 14 tackles, and then it was a 68 for Christy Stratton, which also took 12 tackles. So I think someone like a Whitford and a Single who are more mobility players versus a Rowbottom who is a contested bully, it does mean that, I reckon she'll still be lower than what you're expecting, but I think those other 2 players will be harmed more. And I actually think that means that Single's probably not a pickup at this point and might be, for the next 2 weeks at least, hard to conceivably be a top 5er.
Because, she had 11, I kind of see it as similar to you, Liam, where, Lucy Single is a player who actually scores a lot of points through tackles. But she had 11 tackles on the weekend for a 65. And that's where, against some of these stronger teams, the tackles will probably still be there, but the actual ability to get the ball won't. And that's where I agree with you, Liam. The top 5 potential there for Lucy Singles, it just dries up because, sure, she's still probably going to get somewhere between 7 to 10 tackles every week, which is a good chunk of points. But if you're only getting, an 8 disposal game like she did against Adelaide, that's where you're going to see the points drying up.
Yeah. And no marks as well. So that's good. It's really going to hurt those kind of players. And that's true basically of every matchup that that Brisbane has, particularly when they're just going no tag, one-on-one. This is how we're going to beat you. We're not going to free anyone else up by tagging. They're really going to struggle. So the upcoming matchups that, you're going to see from Brisbane, Gold Coast are obviously a big problem. Collingwood this week could be rough for Benici if they decide not to tag Davey, or if Davey is out with an ankle injury. I'm mightily concerned about what's going to happen to Benici. And then rolls into Adelaide. I actually don't mind that one. I think it impacts Hatchard, but also probably the top end for Noffy.
Yep. The one that the midfielders were coming out as a good team to pick from was GWS, which is interesting. Parker, we saw have a very big week, and she's someone that we've loved in previous seasons. Do we think she's back, and is this suggesting that she could be a good trade-in option? I personally would have loved to trade her in this week, except that I can't afford to, because I'm thinking this run is going to be good for her.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Like, I think the problem for Elise Parker is if she's playing in the midfield, we know she's a gun. But we've seen her get thrown around a lot, which isn't great. I want to do it. I desperately want to do it because it's Elise Parker, but I just can't quite bring myself to do it.
So I advocated the fact that by the end of the season, I'm going to have Elise Parker. She surprised me with what she did against North, but I think that what she did in getting her 139 was the same game that she had last year in round 2 against Brisbane. It's like a team allows her to have 100% CBAs, which is what she had, and does not bother to put any attention into her. They're much like, and GWS is very concerned about stopping another midfielder, and so Parker does whatever she wants. The problem is she was really good and she had 100% CBAs. And I think that with West Coast coming up this week, I think you're going to see the same kind of everyone gets a job at every stoppage on her type of tag that Gardner saw last week. So that's my concern, is that Parker's a great option going forward after this week, because I really do believe that she'll see some stoppage attention, because we've seen that from West Coast more this year than we've ever seen before. It's like spearheaded by Swanson, who's an endurance athlete. Bella Smith is just a pitbull terrier running around. And then McCarthy is like bloody strong, one of the few players that can match the strength of Parker. So I would be trading in Parker with some trepidation for this week. If it's a play you can hold off and do next week, I think that's better. But I still think you can do it this week because she's a gun and she has the ceiling.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And as you say, like, West Coast are a team that we know will put effort into her because they can't just have a Garner and a Riddell running around doing whatever they want and being better anyway. So I'm holding off this week, but I wouldn't blame people if they did pull the trigger.
Yep, I like it. And then the tagging, which after watching Single, who is a very good tagger, got me wondering around which teams are they facing over the next couple of weeks and who is she likely to be put on. So we've got Richmond next week for her. That's probably Conti, but I don't know if Conti's that fantasy or highly owned anyway.
She's a target this week for people because she's coming off a 121.
I think she's about 15% owned as well, which for a unique midfielder is actually reasonably high.
Oh, okay.
Although, to be honest, I haven't checked inside the top 1,000.
Yeah.
Whether or not she's particularly highly owned.
That's true.
5% inside the top 1,000, and one person in the top 100 has her.
Yeah, so not too concerned about that one, I guess. Then we've got the Lions. So that would be Anderson, who probably also not that well owned. I guess the big one here, we've got GWS coming up with Parker in round 9 and Essendon, where she could be tagging for Sparkus in round 10. But that's just my little single alert. Liam, did you want to talk through some of the other tags that we've seen pretty regularly?
So West Coast is obviously the one that we were just discussing. I think the main one that impacts is Parker, because outside of that, like, unless you're deciding you want to trade in like Ellie Blackburn this week, she's got them in round 9, and then Hatchard in round 10. But I really don't think that outside of that, West Coast are going to be the biggest concern. The other one that was really interesting on the weekend, and we kind of almost haven't discussed it at all, which is Jazz Garner. had her in my captain's rankings at number 2 because I thought there was a possibility that Annalise Lister might have a bit of an impact on her. Lister drops out, and I'm on the live stream with Bales on Friday night when it comes out, and I'm like, wow, look, it's got to be Garner number 1 captain option this week because there's no tag at GWS. As it turns out, there's an even more impactful tagger at GWS, and that's Haneen Zarika, who did an incredible job in getting from stoppage to stoppage in basically after quarter time. And really, that was the main reason why Garner had such a tough game, setting aside the really windy conditions that made for some difficult scoring for both sides. I think it's, again, much like West Coast, where they've just decided that part of their midfield strategy is to run some form of stoppage attention or tag. Now, why more teams don't do this against North Melbourne, I have no effing idea, no earthly idea why they don't do it. But Sarika, I think if Lister's back, it doesn't sound like it'll be straight away. I think it's more just an indication from the coaching staff that someone will cop stoppage attention. The other one I did want to mention was Georgia Nanscorn at Essendon, who has now in 2 separate weeks, so she did it against Anne Hatchard and then this week against Bree Davey, basically plays post defense at stoppages on the best midfielder. She did a pretty good job she did a pretty good job of it against Bree Davey and was actually doing a good job of it against Hatchard until they were forced to abandon it with injuries at Essendon that really did impact things. I think Hatchard might have had a 15-point first quarter when she was doing it. So it is impactful. It's just not a week-to-week thing. Then the other 2 that have done good jobs so far this year are Hayley Miller and Tanya Kennedy, but these are both teams that don't have a consistent strategy to decide, they're a constant stoppage tagger team.
And probably need a midfielder more than they need a tagger.
Hayley Miller's probably the biggest mystery of this season, to be completely honest, because we've seen her play as a tagger. We've seen her playing at full forward. She's one of the most dynamic midfielders in the competition, and they seem to be intent on doing anything but playing her as a dynamic midfielder. It's baffling.
Oh, the whole team is baffling. And how do they win that game on the weekend? I don't understand Fremantle at all.
Tua Carreno put the small forward on the goals. That was great.
I mean, she played a great game to Carreno, but
she did.
She was playing the role that she's supposed to play, which is a small forward, which is probably why it worked.
And riddle me this: Ange Stannard, right? She was a defender in the past. They're like, oh no, you're actually now a small pressure forward, and now they're like, no, even though we've got a surplus of midfielders, you're now a midfielder too. She was their highest CBA getting midfielder on the weekend. What are they doing?
It was also her second lowest fantasy score, despite the highest CBAs.
I don't get Fremantle. To be out-tackled by 30 and win the game when you broke the record in the first 2 weeks is unfathomably weird.
Well, I don't think we're going to get to the bottom of this right now, but I agree. It is very weird and very annoying. Looking at defenders then, since we jumped straight into the midfield, the defence versus position analysis is suggesting not to pick up defenders from Collingwood. So they've got some pretty tough matchups coming up. We saw Butler come back, which probably made Geordie Allen less attractive, and Slisher might be coming back. We're not sure what role she'll be in or when exactly. I think when I saw this, my main takeaway was Geordie Allen, someone we spoke about, has kind of faded from the top 5. Someone we kind of were like recently, maybe she could come back. Will, thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I saw Lauren Butler returning to the team as a good thing for Geordie Allen. I thought, you know what? She comes in, Allen can move further up the ground. Great. Allen hadn't been scoring too badly, all things considered as well. She'd had a lowest score of 54 and a high of 64. So she wasn't scoring huge, but she was scoring consistently enough. So I was like, you know what? Maybe she's going to come back into that sort of higher up the ground role. Her average is already okay. Going to be great. Against the Bombers, as Liam said, not great conditions, 26.
Yeah.
Just abysmal for what I was expecting. So I think it's pretty obvious right now to put a line through those two. Butler also, I think, scored in the 20s, so could be a late season unique pick if, a few come back, but it's not looking great.
I think there's a lot down to the weather there. That was probably part of the reason why Collingwood won, is that they didn't look to over-possess the ball kind of at the back or to the side of stoppages. It was just this like, we're just going to punt it long and we're going to try and out-kick your zones, whether or not we're into the wind or with the wind in that game. And that was the thing that the Bombers couldn't do, and it's indicative of a younger, less experienced side and coach. And that's why they won, and it's also why no defender from Collingwood scored well. Like, I'm scrolling through. We've got Selena Carlson with a 40, Sophie Casey with a 37, Brazali with a 35, Allen with a 26, Lauren Butner with a 22. It is,
so I think that
horrific.
Can also be indicative of what's going to come for Collingwood, just in terms of fantasy scorers based on this. Liam, there's another couple of teams you don't want to pick defenders from.
Yeah, the two, maybe not for the rest of the season, but probably just for the next 2 weeks, Essendon and Gold Coast have really terrible runs for defenders. So the Bombers go up against the two hardest teams to score against, and Gold Coast have the hardest matchup this week in Richmond, and then follow that up with another red matchup in round 7, which, if I pull up the fixture, means that they will be hitting... they hit Brisbane. So, unfortunately for those people, it's probably going to be relevant for us to discuss later, but do you actually trade out of Daisy Darcy off the back of 2 pretty soft scores and 2 horrid matchups in the next 2 weeks?
It's something I've been considering. I've got other things that I've been concerned about, but it is definitely something I'm thinking. I think I might have to leave it this week, but yeah.
And unfortunately, you're leaving it for the worst week.
Exactly. That's the problem.
Emma O'Driscoll, who'd averaged, 70, had 30 against Richmond. He's hard.
Yeah.
Yep. And just on a surprise in the defenders line, Melbourne has come up as a team that, based on their run, is looking to be good for defenders, which I find very interesting. Given that they're currently ranked number 1, I don't know what exactly this is based off. I don't imagine the ball to be back there all that much. But I guess it's kind of having a look at the fact that they're playing teams ranked 2, 3 and 4 in the next kind of 5 games. I mean, we know that even then, Fremantle ranked 10th is a good team for defenders, supposedly. I mean, I wouldn't be touching anyone there. We've already spoken about Gay. We've kind of already spoken about Lampard a little bit. But just thought I'd throw that fun fact in there.
Yeah, I'd have to see it, to be honest. It'd be, based on what we've seen from Melbourne, it'd be pretty brave to pull them up just straight on based on those fixtures. But if they do start to get a bit more of it, particularly Maddie Gay is someone who we know can drift further up the ground and get a bit more of the ball, maybe that might be a value pick, but I find it hard to pick Melbourne defenders straight off, considering the way they've been playing.
Yep, I agree. Quickly looking at the rucks, it's suggesting a no from Brisbane or Richmond, and I think Richmond's a pretty obvious one. We saw kind of Seymour get a little bit hurt previously. She's sharing that ruck role with Kelly there, so probably not one that you'd want to be picking up, although we will talk a little bit later about elite ruck upgrade potentials. And what I find really interesting is it's suggesting a yes for Carlton rucks based on the next run. So Jess Good is someone that we've seen top her line a couple of weeks ago, really improved now that Brianne Moody is apparently an All-Australian full forward. We've got, so she's one that she's quite expensive now, but she's had a good run at it. And the underrated player of season 7, we've got Edmonds from the Bulldogs, which is also suggesting has a good ruck lineup. Thoughts here, guys, or shall we jump to the forwards?
I think the other thing to mention is Matilda Schultz has a great matchup next week. Well, sorry, this coming round, because she's got Sydney. So that'll be relevant for discussion, Mel. Smug Morford areas in the corner.
Over to the forwards.
Steer clear of Collingwood.
Yeah, stay clear of Collingwood, essentially.
Which Collingwood forward were we picking?
Sabrina Frederick, I guess.
That's a ruck.
I mean, she's
playing as a forward.
She's listed as a forward, though.
Look, just reading it out.
Yeah. But I get what you mean, Liam. Yes. So Sarah Rowe playing as a midfielder.
Yeah, she's the only one that is listed as a forward in the game that I've kind of put a question mark on for later. But
my only point might be Nell Morris Dalton is now at 300k, so maybe you can't expect, ceiling scores of 38 to 45. Might only get 30s.
Larry Morris has done okay.
She's on 300k still, I think.
370.
No,
She made
she's 370.
70 grand last week.
370. I apologise. Oof.
Yeah.
She went up to
370.
from bottom price.
Yeah.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. I'm 1 week behind on my data on obscure Collingwood forwards that no one owns anymore.
Oh, gosh. It's also suggesting to stay away from Brisbane, which I think is interesting. It's kind of, to me, falls in the same bucket as why it's not liking them for rucks. There's just something skewing it a little bit, but also maybe it's around, because Davidson looked like a real contender after her last big game. Any thoughts on forwards from Brisbane?
Key forwards.
Not really.
Yeah, key forwards kind of always not a huge fan unless they're playing in the ruck a bit. Davidson, big game against a fairly weak opposition in Hawthorn. Don't love it, to be honest. But I think one of the things about it is the forward line at the moment, there's a clear top four, and you're basically just trying to figure out who you can put as your fifth if you've managed to get all four of them. I think the forwards are probably the most simple line at the moment.
Yep. Yes, I see. Cool. Okay. Well, in terms of teams it is suggesting for forwards, we've got GWS and North Melbourne. I think we can understand why North Melbourne, they're a very dominant side and have got a good lineup coming. But GWS, any GWS forwards coming out to you guys?
There's one who was nearly a top 5 last year who I think their price now starts with a 5. It's Georgia Garnett. Who has scored horrendously. Oh, no, it's 491 off the back of 3 scores in the 30s.
There's no marks for Georgia Garnett this year, which is disappointing.
Which I think embodies almost perfectly what... It matches my eyes, because I just think that GWS is so much chaos now trying to get the ball to go forward. Their unwillingness to turn to their best kicks is evidence of that. But like Garnett averaged nearly 70 last year off the top of my head and has now dropped basically 400k and can score at 70s when given the right role. So she's a name to keep your kind of finger on the pulse of.
Yeah. Okay. So, wow, that was pretty good conversation about the teams that we have, and we threw a couple of players' names in there as well. But now we're going to go through our dedicated love it or lister it section. Love it is keep, lister it is trade it out. And we might do a bit of a rapid fire here with some names. I will throw one out, give it to you guys. Let me know what you think. Will Priest.
Love it.
Yeah.
Any
D1.
explanation required? No, we've already spoken about
highest
it.
averaging defender. Love it.
I never thought I'd
Lock
say
it
the
in.
words, but Nick Del Santo has finally given one person a consistent role.
Oh my God.
I know.
That was a monumental occasion.
That crow that I just ate tasted terrible.
Can I just go back to my highlights of the week and put Liam giving some praise to Collingwood? I mean, Liam giving some praise to St Kilda.
Specifically Nick Del Santo.
Yeah.
Just let it be known,
Okay,
I still want him to be fired.
Noted.
Oh.
Liam, over to you then. Heads. Rising
Ella
star
Heads,
nom?
still love it. I know that she was a trade out for a bunch of people this week, and someone on the podcast may have talked about trading her out on our last week's episode.
Yes, I was tossing up. Well, actually, no, I was saying that I'm not going to do any backline trades last week, so I was never actually going to trade her out. But she was one that I was going to be looking at coming into this week when I just knew I needed to do a backline trade. And got to say, Ella Heads, you've stuck in there another week now because that was a great score. And I like that cash gen. My next one I've got here is Bess Keeney, who frustrated me when I started with her, but she finally had the type of game that I was really hoping she would play, where she's, maybe it's because they're reversing Adelaide and it's a really tough matchup for them, but Gold Coast are doing a lot better than I thought they would this season to start off with. But then in arguably their hardest matchup to date, and by far, she had a cracker of a game, heaps of tackles, lots of kicks, lots of marks. She was just like that backline role that you want to see where they just intercept it before it gets any further. And I don't necessarily think she is a trade in, I guess, for some of the reasons we spoke about last week. There's a lot of people in Gold Coast backline that get some points. Also, I think Gold Coast could be in for a good season, but just had to mention it. What a great week.
Their run's really bad next 2 weeks. Horrid. Would not be trading in Bess Keeney and might be considering trading her out. Same as the next person we're probably going to mention.
Yeah, we already spoke about Jordan Allen a little bit there with Will's insights.
I was going to throw to Dizzy Darcy for the same reasons, that Gold Coast defender.
Wouldn't be bringing them in if you've already got them. Might be ones to move out.
Are you going to trade her out, Will?
Not this week, based on my current trades, but it's tempting. I might have to see what I can do with it.
Yeah, this was another week where I was probably, in my current trades, I've done a ruck, mid and forward and left my back line as it is. But yeah, it's definitely one to consider. Stannett. Liam mentioned a little bit before about her confusing role. Love it or lister it?
It's a lister it for me. As a trade-in, if you got her, you hold her, it's not worth trading out. We know that defenders are bloody impossible to pick. But it's the fact that, she had her highest CBA role and her second worst score. I would be avoiding Fremantle, just the place and then also the team. For reference, I'm saying that just because Mel is from Perth and it would cut slightly more deep than otherwise.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
For the record, for our listeners at home, Mel's face was one of actual hurt. Just a little,
oh, that's rough.
Yeah. Well, speaking of rough and Mel, Gunjaka, what a great trade-in option that was last week, Will. So glad I convinced you to do that as we were sitting at the game.
For the record, everyone at home, I had Charlotte Thomas in my team up until 10 minutes before, until Mel decided to start talking about saving money, and I got sucked in. Currently, I don't love it, but I'm going to say keep her for another week, just because I think that she can do okay in the next couple of weeks, but if she has a second shocker in a row, that's a definite delister.
Is it a wait one more week if you've got her, but don't be picking her up?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If you've got her, I don't think it's worth trading her out at the moment, but I wouldn't be bringing her in.
Yeah, her scoring line looks like the next player that we got a question about, which is Katie Lynch, because Claudia Gunjaka goes 80-80-30. Now, Katie Lynch has just come off 2 good scores. We got a question on Twitter, is Katie Lynch an option? I'd be lying if I wasn't tempted.
You say 2 good scores. She's gone 80-40-70, 50-40.
Hang on. Really?
Yep.
Are you...
That's what I'm like. This is stay away zone for me.
Oh, sorry, I missed a 40 in the middle. I thought when I read it earlier, I was like, oh, that's a 60. That's fine. What are we worrying about?
Katie Lynch is a classic yo-yo defender. I can see why people are tempted.
But don't be fooled.
Yeah.
It's a lister it for me.
Bit of lister the gamble. Bit of lister.
Yeah. Over to the midfield. Prasparkas. Which one? That would be Georgie. She's had a down week. She's lost a bit of money. I think that could be a good love it from me.
I'm actually going to go to what I said earlier in the week and say I'm actually going to lister it for a week. Because I think that she could lose a bit more money against a tough opposition to score against in Essendon, and then she'll be ripe for the picking next week.
It really does come down to what you think she can score, because her break-even at the moment predicted is 119. We know that she can go above that, but let's say she were to score, Will, what you reckon, which is about 100. She kind of did what she did against Sydney in that weird with the game at North Sydney. She'd lose about 50k, which puts her at 1.65, 1.7... 1.065 or 1.07 mil. So very attainable trade up or sideways for Benici if you've got her, or even Tiana Smith if you're still holding.
Yeah, it's a big up from Tiana Smith as someone that tried to do that, but yes. So Benici, she's a listerette for me. The matchup next week, the downward trajectory of the scores.
Yeah. If it wasn't for that matchup, I would have said, love it, just keep her on board. She's a consistent scorer, had one down week, but bad matchup. If you can afford that trade, if you don't have other areas to work on, I think that's a good time to make a switch.
Liam, what about Amy McDonald?
Phew. I think I love it. I think I love it because she's cheaper than Georgie. We know that she has the ceiling. She's got the ceiling in the 120s, even before longer games. Has still had some scores in the hundreds this year. Has kind of mirrored, similar to what we saw with Riddell, where there's just some times where she throws in a 70. She scored more than Georgie last week, and I don't think she's going to cop attention from Essendon, even if they are I think they're a difficult matchup for midfielders, but I think Amy McDonald is someone that I still back in to go above what she's priced at, or at least above her break even, and she'll be mightily unique. So I love it.
Riddell was a hard one for me because I loved having her on my side for those first couple of weeks where she made a lot of money. Was
it a mistake to trade her out?
No, because I traded her at the right time. So I did nail that game. But now I'm like, I want to bring her back in, but I got this weird thing about once I traded you out, you're out, which obviously doesn't apply to Bowers and whatever. But watch and wait for Bowers back in my side for the third time. But yeah, I think she's still really good potential. She's still so lowly owned. The tag's going to Garner, if anything. Oh, God, I want to bring her back in.
Yeah, personally, I love it. And it's the person I'm trading T. Smith for this weekend is the reason why Dizzy Darcy's still in my side.
Yeah.
Damn. T.
I'm
Smith
in a similar
up
spot.
to her.
Riddell and Dowrick are the two that I'm like getting rid of Benici and T. Smith. That's where I'm looking.
Yeah. To me, Riddell has had one poor game, which we talked a bit about, where she scored that 79 against Geelong. Other than that, hasn't dropped below 105. Fremantle, we know that teams can score reasonably well against because their midfield is all over the place. I think that she's a good option. And also considering her average is probably very well priced as well, I should say as well.
Yeah, she is one of the best for that.
It just kills me that I traded her out and now she's the fifth highest scoring player.
Well, she did lose a bit of money last week.
So far.
So you traded her out at a good time.
That's true. And
'Cause you were a
Rowbottom
week
was
after
also
me,
better. I think I gained like 30 points. I gained about 30 points by going from her to Rowbottom. I just should have done the week before when she scored a 70.
Speaking of, Rowbottom?
Yeah. To me, it's keep her if you got her. I don't think you're trading her out at this stage because that's a very luxury trade. But yeah, I wouldn't be bringing her in.
Yep. Dowrick, you've already mentioned, big fan of.
Just for the run, and there's also just some symmetry in my mind to bring her in against Sydney in the game I traded her out
personal
for last
redemption.
year. There's some cosmic narrative resonance to that.
We just know that in this game, Dowrick is either going to score 146 or like 20.
Or 2.
The cosmic resonance is going to happen. We just don't know which way yet.
Yep. Quickly, Ali Anderson. I think given what we've seen for Brisbane's matchup and how it's suggested, just going back to my notes.
I've got it as only greens until round 10.
Yeah, okay. I don't know why I thought I had a flag for Brisbane there. Oh, that was for Rucks. Yeah,
yeah, don't
fine.
mind it. Unique option. Probably not the highest scoring, but has been very consistent, so I don't mind it. Especially as a sideways trade for someone like a Benici.
Yeah, that's true. If you can't get up there. And lastly, Blackburn.
Oh, I don't like the Dogs, personally.
No, me neither.
I don't like the Dogs that much either, but I don't mind Blackburn because before last round she was below 1 million. She's now only just popped up above. We know that she has 3-week stretches in her where she can be a top 3, top 4 averaging player in the competition. And the Western Bulldogs run is fine, actually good for basically the rest of the year. So a matchup this week against Carlton, who aren't going to be able to stop her, straight rolls on then into a game against Adelaide, which are not actually that hard to score against for midfielders because they just don't care. They'll let you do whatever you want. Yeah, tacklers will still beat you by 50. And then rolls into that against a game against Sydney. And like Sydney can give up decent enough scores. I think Ellie Blackburn is in the same price bracket as Dowrick, but has better pedigree.
Possibly a player that if you don't have a huge bank of cash to move on T. Smith, you could only need about 100, 150k to get up to Blackburn. Could be a good value pick there.
we had a question here from Twitter, I think. How cheap are you willing to go into midfield for a trade?
So this is one that I've just seen percolating around, because obviously we're at the stage now where we're trying to have completed midfields and then trying to fix up for some dud defenders and forwards. I was just having a look as well at kind of who are the cheapest players that I would bring into my midfield at the moment. I would have said last week it was Ellie Blackburn, just because I think that she's the only one
And so
that
what
was at
price
that
point
kind
are you
of price who
talking
has
here?
the ceiling.
Just a mil, essentially.
I'm talking about like probably just above 900k. So the cheapest player that I would be willing to have at my M5, I really don't hate the idea of Jenna Bruton, who's now put up 110. Jenna Bruton's at 947k. And then Belle Dawes is at 976. The one that I really have loved what they've done the last 2 weeks is
Greg's
Greg
looking
Egan.
good.
So Grace Egan.
Just under $1 million.
She's not going to cop a tag this week either, and is still below $1 million. And then you go up into Dowrick, Blackburn. I don't like Whitford, and then basically from there it's players we've talked about all season: Swanson, Benici, etc. So it's probably Bruton and above is the lowest I'm willing to go for my M5.
If you don't have T. Smith or something.
Yes, or you're looking to be scrimpy and from your T. Smith up.
Yeah, I think the only one that I'd probably throw at you would be Kirsty Lamb, is probably the only one under that price that I'd consider, but I probably wouldn't just because of the way my team's structured. But 869, just come off a 91. We know she can score well. Maybe the cheapest option you could consider, but I think generally speaking around that $1 million mark is where you're looking.
Yep, I agree. Over to the forwards. Oh, Malloy. Yeah, I know we spoke about this a little bit earlier, but I feel like she's got a decent enough run for her to stay in the love pile. But I would like to list her just because I'm annoyed. And I like something I joke about a lot is that my fantasy team is players that I like watching as well. That is a definite element because I'm not here to win. I'm here to have fun, as my rank suggests. And Malloy is getting to frustrating watching levels, and therefore she's someone that I kind of want to trade out. Liam?
Yeah, I fully echo that sentiment. I just have bigger problems, and I would say that Kaufman's probably a worse player. But my question for you is you've got Malloy and single. Malloy with the better run and the better ceiling stays in your side at the F5, or is it single with the worse run and the more consistency? And she will never get tagged.
Single.
Fair.
Until she goes against Parker.
But yeah, I'm looking at Malloy out this week. I'm in a similar boat where, like, as much as Dizzy Darcy's possibly more a priority, I'm like Mel, where I've just kind of got sick of it.
Even though Daisy Darcy's also had 2 crap weeks.
Yeah, but I think I'm more willing to put up with it in defence for some reason. I feel like the forward line's where you should be getting points.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, the forward line is for the forwards that are not really forwards, that are midfielders that are racking up the points. And if I get a 40 or a 50 in defence, I'm like, oh, okay. If I get a low score in the forward, I'm like, damn it.
You kind of go,
wasted opportunity. Yeah.
But yeah, I think essentially my second trade this week is choosing which of Darcy or Malloy to go. And the reason I've gone for Malloy is because I can probably find someone cheaper to get the money to go up to Riddell. Whereas if I want to move on Dizzy Darcy, there's not a huge amount of money I can actually make from that trade to get someone who I think will score well.
Goldsworthy. This is an interesting one as someone that traded her out, annoyingly. Is she one that you bring in at this price? Like, is she not just someone... Can we look past the fact that she started cheap and has made a lot of money and take her on instead as a genuine mid-pricer?
I think you can.
I think you can. I think you'd be...
I love it.
I think you'd be disappointed to have missed out on that cash gen, but I don't see why you can't pick her, considering that if you take out that score that she had at the start of the year, which was the 26, she scored 270s, an 80 and 100. That's fantastic for a player who's less than $1 million.
Yeah, I think it's a great trade. She's priced at 85 at the moment, and like I think she has the ceiling. We've talked about the fact that GWS has a great run. She's at that kind of 40% CBA's role, and I think that in games that are more normal, where GWS actually kick goals, she is the number one candidate, I reckon, to actually kick them. So that she had an all right score on the weekend, and I think she can go even better. So, yeah, I love it. I think she's fringe top 5. I think she might be a better player than Single for the rest of the season.
We've already spoke a little bit about Davidson. Hooker is a very interesting one as well. You've traded her out already, Will?
I did. I missed out on the 96, which was when I traded Malloy for her, so that was all around just bad. I think Hooker's probably going to score mostly around that 60, 70 mark. So if you've got a fine at an F5, if that's what you're running with, but I think you can probably do better. Probably not like a priority trade out at the moment, but definitely not a priority trade in, put it that way.
Rowe is a fascinating one as well. She's kind of snuck up on us. Like, actually, if you look at the average ranking, she's kind of been up there in the top 10 this whole time. Have either one of you actually seriously considered... wow, I'm nailing that. Have either one of you actually seriously considered trading her in at any stage?
Not really, because Will's already mentioned it on like episode 2. She has a 30 in her, which is concerning. And then also...
Hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, it hasn't happened yet. And it's like the exploding whale on the beach. It's like, when is it going to happen and just destroy your side? But also, she only had 71% time on ground on the weekend. So...
Still scored a 77,
I know, but that was so weird. I think it's a lister it for me.
I think for me, beyond the 105, which was the only time I genuinely considered bringing her in, which was after round 2, and the reason I didn't was for that reason you just said, Liam, is because I know there's a 30 somewhere. She's scored consistently between 67 and 77. Tight banding. It's the sort of thing where, like, if you've got her as your F4 or 5 at the moment, great, you know you're going to get consistent scoring, but I don't think it's going to be enough to actually get her into that top 5 towards the end. I don't think there's much more money to be made from Sarah Rowe. I think if you've got her, fine, not a priority, but I wouldn't be bringing her in.
And is there anyone else you guys wanted to speak about?
Yes, there are a few, but I will keep them brief. I think Paxi Paxman, if you take away a bad score in round 1, is another player to look at. I love. The other one that I wanted to talk about at GWS was Nikki Barr, who again is doing consistent things with a more consistent role, which is, again, one of those ones where I'm like, oh, that's some great advice, Liam. Why didn't you do that in your own side? It's like, because I'm dumb sometimes. So I love Nikki Barr. And then the other one, who I think is a name that has not been discussed really at any point, and that's Emma King, who has a 3-game average above 80. She has been getting more time in the ruck and then drifting forward, and we talked about the fact that North have a great forward run. This past round gone, like, there was very few goals scored by North Melbourne. I actually thought Kate Sheilor might have been an interesting play at the 500k range, and she did absolutely nothing. But I think Emma King, she's getting, I think, about 30 or 40% ruck contest, but when she does go, she just has CBAs, taps, and then sits forward. So I actually think that's a really interesting play if you want to pod.
I just want to quickly say that I say it every time Nikki Barr comes on. I'm so glad Nikki Barr's finally been given a role where she can actually play the game that she can play, because I've been watching her for years play terrible roles. And it's so nice to see her playing a good role.
We're a bit emotional. Are we recording a bit late?
Years of pain.
This is 7 seasons worth of watching Nikki Barr not be the player that I know she can be, simply because of roles.
Oh, beautiful. Well, that leads us into the ruck question, which is... I'm going
to sit this one out. See you guys.
Yeah, boy.
Yep, so smug corner.
That's okay. He deserved the smugness for this one, I'd say. The question is now that Matilda Schultz has made a lot of money and she's up there in the 800s, the reason why you would bring in a rookie ruck is not, well, cash gen so that you can upgrade. You can either upgrade earlier like Will did, or you can get to the point now where you're considering upgrading. She's made enough money that we can shuffle her across to someone else that's got a higher average for not a lot of extra money on her head. Is this the time you do it? And if so, to who? I might start here because I was seriously considering this for this week, but to me it's still a little bit of a luxury trade. I would love to do it, but I think I might need to fix up Darcy and Single ahead of a lovely upgrade from Schultz to Strom. But if I were to do it, it would be Schultz to Strom. And the reason for this is because when you have a look at a post-Bowers world for Freo, yeah, there's a lot of chaos, but understandably there's a lot of chaos because you've got Bowers out who's for the foreseeable future. A large share of the tackles have gone to Strom. She's still taking hit-outs with Hetherington not playing. Kind of between her... I wrote this down somewhere else, but there's only a few people that are really getting those tackles and hit-outs in Freo, and if she can take the lion's share of them, I can see her continuing to do better and better. I was really hoping some of these would go to Jay Flynn, which had a pretty good game on the weekend as well. I think Liam might have been hoping some of them go to Kaufman, but I think Strom, and Will was hoping some of them would go to East, but I think Strom is the ultimate winner from this.
I was about to say, in the end, the ruck was the one that took the tackles. It was.
The answer is no one took the tackles. Turbo left the team and they had 30 fewer. It's just that Strom has stayed consistent.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So I think that she's a real contender for a ruck upgrade for only an additional $124,000 or $120-ish grand, as compared to Morfitt, who is 13-point average ahead, basquillion dollars ahead when you're thinking about a ruck upgrade. She is almost unattainable, having made so much money. You kind of wanted to be on the Morfitt bandwagon a while ago, because even though we've made more money with Schultz, we've not even really got close to being able to sideways. Okay, and now the smug corner.
No, do not send it. Do not send it to the smug corner. Agree with almost all of what you're saying with on Strom, or everything about up until you say she's the one you want to, you'd target to bring in. I think
which is one I'm targeting to bring in.
Yes. I think Edmonds at 47K more is the better option, because she has no competition for her role. She had, I think, 100% time and ground on the weekend, which, if you look at what she was doing in her first season of Western Bulldogs, is outstanding. She was at like 40% time on ground when she was at Richmond and then at the Dogs. So I think the fact that she has no competition for her role, she does not have many particularly hard matchups after this week. I'm really hoping this is going to be timed up perfectly. She's got the Carlton matchup this week, won't score amazingly. Matilda Schultz has Ali Morfitt in the ruck, which is a really easy matchup to score against, because Ali Morfitt's actually not very good at stopping other people from rucking. She's just a really good kick long ball clearance midfielder who happens to be 188 centimetres. I think those two, Edmonds bad, Schultz good this week, would mean that gap gets smaller. It's a trade for me next week.
Yeah, I like that. The one thing I will just add, though, is the reason I like Strom and the fact that she doesn't have that role to herself is that it does allow her to do a bit more of everything else rather than just being in the ruck. Where she's got, when she was playing the Bombers, she had 33 hit-outs. So it's like kind of high 20s or low 20s to low 30s, which is kind of similar to... kind of similar to Edmonds in that way, in that she can go from like low 20s to mid high 30s. So I think it is kind of similar. So I think but we did see that from that analysis I was talking about earlier, the Bulldogs have one of the best lineups for rucks. So that definitely adds in. However, to me, like you said, for you, rucks are a luxury trade that are probably not going to get done this week as much as I would love to.
Interestingly enough as well, they're the two highest tackling rucks as well.
Listed as rucks or playing as rucks?
Playing as rucks.
Probably listed as rucks as well, I would assume.
Well, yeah, they are both listed as rucks, but I'm actually not looking at like fantasy stats. I'm looking at like the actual AFLW stats. And yeah, they've got the two highest number of tackles, and they're 20% higher than anyone else at 31 and 30. The next highest is 24 and 23.
Nice. And what's your source?
The aflw.com.au/AFLW/stats.
Yeah, nice. I like it.
I know, I've really delved deep into the internet for these ones.
Liam, did you want to talk through Captain's Corner?
Yes. Yes, we finally finished now a very long Hot Topics. We're now going to have a quick drop by at Captain's Corner. Don't want to spend that much time here because it was not a good time to be there, because Noffy and Garner were both below 100, both for the first time this season, and they were both a rough watch. I think both were surprisingly low scores for different reasons. I really thought that teams would keep going with the conventional theory and hitting up single, but it sounds like that was also mirrored by the rest of the coaches, because she was the most highly selected coach in both the top 1,000 and top 100, and then Garner was the most popular VC. But as it turns out, Gardner was the one to go with. In terms of captain's targets this week, I don't think it'll come as any surprise, but I really will have Ebony Marinoff high once again. I also am really hot on Charlie Rowbottom, and I again am going to be turning to Laura Gardner up against another expansion side in Port Adelaide this week. I think all are going to be high in my captain's rankings.
Liam, I can see there is one listener question here. Basement price mid options that should have made some money on the bench. I think the emphasis here is on should. Is this past tense?
Should make some money on the bench.
Oh, should make. I thought I was should have.
Could be anyone. It could be no one.
Could be no one. Yeah. I think this is a question we get kind of at this time of the week and every week. And it's bloody hard to tell with this new pricing system. It's so dependent on your matchup from that week. I can't even say like, oh, someone's got a break even of 2. It's really, really difficult. We see a lot of scores in the 20s that take away someone who was priced at 340 and they're back at 300 again. Looking at you, Ariana Harrington. It's really, really tough to pick who the good rookies are going to be. Aurora Smith kind of came out of nowhere. She's now at 600k. She's had a score on the weekend that is higher than anything she's ever scored at AFL or VFLW before. Just kind of randomly out of nowhere. It's really tough to answer this. You kind of just have to go with your gut a little bit. Don't pick players. I would say avoid players who have played like a full game of seasons and are still only at 300k, because it's going to be really tough for them to kind of push out of that bracket because of the way the pricing works.
Yeah, you're almost having to take a gamble on a debutant who gets named at this stage. If you see someone who gets named who hasn't played before, that's probably going to be your best bet.
Yeah, the only name that I would put out there for, they're not a mid, they're a defender, particularly if you're looking to try and find someone to replace Mia Bush on your bench. She's very highly owned. Kira Fitzpatrick scored a 51 or 50-something on the weekend. I think that Karen Fitzgerald, that's it. I think that we'll see that Cordner may miss again with her hand injury, as will Kez Peterson with her knee soreness on the weekend. I think she has a break-even of like 10, so you're probably going to make some cash if you do. And then the rest, your guess is as good as mine. Wicksteed, Pope, Tripodi, like who effing knows?
Tripodi, who's now back to 300 after
I know, it's ridiculous.
Well, I was going to go through the trade plans, but it's been a long episode and I've undone mine multiple times while recording this, which, Liam, you get to edit out my little tippy taps on the keyboard later, so enjoy that one. Especially with my finger and still in its cast, so it's real good. Look, we might leave it there. You can find us at Free Kick W Pod. No, yes. What's our social handle?
Free Kick W Pod.
That was it.
You go off hosting for 1 week and you forget the social handle.
Oh, it's gone out of my head. You can find us at Free Kick W Pod on Instagram and Twitter. And listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me on Insta and Twitter as Hi Mel D. Will?
They can find me on Instagram and Twitter at WillH_VI, finding all of the great players, including the great Laura Gardner, at the games.
Oh, so jealous. I wish I stuck around for that second game. And Liam?
You can find me on Twitter at LiamAFLW Fantasy. And you can also, I think it's much more likely this week with the timing of games, there might be a Free Kick on air Twitter space on Thursday night, because we actually have normal game times now.
Oh, yeah, we're not going to have to do a wild shuffle in 5 minutes before the first game starts on Friday. Thank God.
2 hours.
Oh, yeah, I already saw that.
That actually may have saved me from trading in Claudia Gunjaka. So you never know how much it can really affect you.
Oh, golly. Awesome. Well, we'll chat to you all next week.
Catch you later, everyone.
See ya.